Hello, Dazzle. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me today. I am glad that you are here. So, today I'm going to be delving deeper into the topic of what ethics are. So, ethics is the portion of philosophical thought that considers what is right and wrong. Ethics is broken down into three categories: metaethics, normative ethics, and applied ethics. Metaethics is abstract and related to a wide range of more specific practical questions, such as what is truth? Normative ethics is the study of ethical action and is founded upon meta-ethical discussions. Simply stated, normative ethics refers to standards of behavior that tell us how human beings ought to act in the many situations in which we find ourselves. Applied ethics is a discipline of philosophy that attempts to apply ethical theory to real life situations. The discipline has many specialized fields, such as biomedical ethics. So, when we're talking about what ethics is, it can be helpful to identify and think about what ethics is not. So, ethics is not the same as feelings. Feelings provide important information for our ethical choices, and some people have highly developed habits that make them feel bad when they do something wrong. But many people feel good even though they are doing something wrong, and often our feelings will tell us it is uncomfortable to do the right thing if it's hard. Ethics is not religion. Many people are not religious, but ethics applies to everyone. Most religions do advocate high ethical standards, but sometimes do not address all the types of problems that we face. Ethics is not following the law. A good system of law does incorporate many ethical standards, but law can deviate from what is ethical. Law can become ethically corrupt, as some totalitarian regimes have made it. Law can be a function of power alone and designed to serve the interests of narrow groups. Law may have a difficult time designing or enforcing standards in some important areas and may be slow to address new problems. Ethics is not following culturally accepted norms. Some cultures are quite ethical, but others become corrupt or blind to certain ethical concerns, as the United States was to slavery before the Civil War. When in Rome, do as the Romans do is not a satisfactory ethical standard. Ethics is not science. Social and natural science can provide important data to help us make better ethical choices, but science alone does not tell us what we ought to do. Science may provide an exploration for what humans are like, but ethics provides reasons for how humans ought to act. And just because something is scientifically or technologically possible, it may not be ethical to do it. Why identifying ethical standards is hard. There are two fundamental problems in identifying the ethical standards that we should follow. First, on what do we base our ethical standards? And two, how do those standards get applied to specific situations that we face? If our ethics are not based on feelings, religion, law, accepted social practice, or science, what are they based on? Many philosophers and ethicists have helped us answer this critical question. They have suggested different sources of ethical standards that we should use. There are some things that all ethical approaches have in common. 1. Impartiality, weighing interests equally. 2. Rationality, backed by reasons a rational person would accept. 3. Consistency, standards applied similarly to similar cases. 4. Reversibility, standards that apply no matter who makes the rules. So, what use is ethics? For ethics to be useful, they need to have an effect on the way that people behave. Some philosophers think that ethics do this. They argue that if a person realizes that it would be morally good to do something, then it would be irrational for that person not to do it. But humans are often irrational. But ethics do provide good tools for thinking about moral issues. As our world gets smaller with more technology allowing cultures to integrate in more ways than ever, more conflicts arise. This is because each culture has a different set of rules and a different way of looking at the world. This is why we often look at each other as being irrational. Ethics will first allow us to pinpoint what the disagreements truly is, which is an important place to start. Ethics help build a framework for looking at complex problems or ethical dilemmas. An ethical dilemma is a situation in which a choice must be made between two or more potentially justifiable ethical choices. This does not create a right path, but rather eliminate confusion and clarify issues. So there are multiple sources of ethical standards. There is the utilitarian approach, there is the deontology approach, there's the rights approach, the fairness or justice approach, common good approach, virtue approach, natural law, ethical relativism, ethical universalism, and really it should be about putting these approaches together. But let's look at basically what these approaches mean. So, utilitarian approach. Some ethicists emphasize that the ethical action is the one that provides the most good for the most people, or does the least amount of harm, or to put it another way, produces the greatest balance of good over harm. The utilitarian approach deals with consequences. It tries both to increase the good done and to reduce the harm done. The rightness or wrongness of any action must be viewed in terms of the consequences that that action produces. In other words, the consequences are generally viewed according to the extent that they serve some intrinsic good. The ends justify the means. Risk analysis or cost versus benefit analysis is the basis for making ethical decisions. Deontology. Actions in and of themselves can be evaluated ethically as being intrinsically right or wrong. This suggests that an act must be performed because the act in some way is characterized by universality, appropriate for everyone, or that it conforms to moral law, formal rules judging right or wrong. This rightness of an act is judged independent of the consequences that it produces, such as the idea that lying is always wrong. Ethical decisions are based on duty and obligation to others, absolute moral principles that are fixed and don't change. The rights approach. Other philosophers and ethicists suggest that the ethical action is the one that best protects and respects the moral rights of those affected. This approach starts from the belief that humans have a dignity based on their human nature and their ability to choose freely what they do with their lives. On the basis of such dignity, they have a right to be treated as ends and not merely as means to other ends. The list of moral rights, including the rights to make one's own choices about what kind of life to lead, to be told the truth, not to be injured, to a degree of privacy, and so on, is widely debated. Some now argue that non-humans have rights too. Also, it is often said that rights imply duties, in particular, the duty to respect other people's rights. Fairness, or the justice approach. Aristotle and other Greek philosophers have contributed the idea that all equals should be treated equally. Today, we use this idea to say that ethical actions treat all human beings equally, or if unequally, then fairly, based on some standard that is defensible. We pay people more based on their harder work or the greater amount that they contribute to an organization and say that this is fair. But there is a debate over CEO salaries that are hundreds of times larger than the pay of others, and many ask whether the huge disparity is based on a defensible standard or whether it is the result of an imbalance of power and hence is unfair. the common good approach. The Greek philosophers have also contributed the notion that life in community is a good in and of itself, and our actions should contribute to that life. This approach suggests that the interlocking relationships of society are the basis of ethical reasoning, and that respect and compassion for all others, especially the vulnerable, are requirements of such reasoning. This approach also calls attention to the common conditions that are important to the welfare of everyone. This may be a system of laws, effective police and fire departments, healthcare, a public education system, or even public recreation areas. The virtue approach. A very ancient approach to ethics is that ethical actions ought to be consistent with certain ideal virtues that provide for the full development of our humanity. These virtues are dispositions and habits that enable us to act according to the highest potential of our character and on behalf of values: honesty, courage, compassion, generosity, tolerance, love, fidelity, integrity, fairness, self-control, and prudence are all examples of virtues. Virtue ethics asks of any action, what kind of person will I become if I do this? Or is this action consistent with my acting at my best? Natural law. This theory is based upon Christian faith historically, but has since been expanded to a non-secular view. The eternal law is the rational plan by which all creation is ordered by God or science. Humans, as rational beings, have the power to participate in natural or eternal law, while non-rational beings can only be affected by it. Thus, this law is universally knowable and universally binding. This means that we, as humans, have an inherent ability to actualize our potential, and ethical decisions should be based upon supporting that actualization. Ethical relativism. This theory holds that morality is relative to the norms of one's culture. Ethical concepts cannot be considered apart from the social contextual environment in which they occur. Factors of family, religious, and cultural standards and beliefs are important determinants of ethical standards. Expected socialized behaviors of a culture serve to influence the individual's understanding of ethical behavior. The theory states that before decisions are made, the context of the decision must be examined. The doctrine states that there are no absolute truths in ethics, and that what is morally right or wrong varies from person to person or from society to society. The theory believes that variances in culture and society influence whether an act is moral. Ethical universalism. This is in direct opposition to ethical relativism. It states that there is a system of norms and values that is universally applicable to everyone, everywhere, at every time. Absolutism states no exception. A rule is a rule. Under this theory, there are certain human truths that apply to all people simply by nature of being human. The Ten Commandments are an example of this. It gives a list of things that a person should never do. Putting the approaches together. Each of the approaches helps us determine what standards of behavior can be considered ethical. There are still problems to be solved, however. There is no generally accepted ethical theory, and different ethical theories might very well result in different judgments. So what should we do if we run into a new case? Well, we can apply our ethical theories to it, but we should be open to the possibility that the new case might reveal a flaw in our theory, and therefore we should never blindly apply an ethical theory and rely on the outcome. The first problem is that we might not agree on the content of some of these specific approaches, and we may not all agree to the same set of human and civil rights. We may not agree on what constitutes the common good, and we may not even agree on what is considered good and what is considered a harm. And the second problem is that the different approaches may not all answer the question, what is ethical, in the same way. Nonetheless, each approach gives us important information with which to determine what is ethical in a particular circumstance. Well, that's about it for my rambling today. Thanks for coming and spending some time with me. If you like my rambling, then click on that like button. It really does help. And until we talk again, you guys be sure to take care of yourselves. Bye!